silver screen set up in the Karachi Maidans. So it's a very dubious outfit in my view. It has done very little actually to serve the interests of those who it claimed to support. Now it's gone away from saying we're a refugee organization. Now it's the movement for the whole of Pakistan. That's interesting.
Just a quick one on the topic of end-to-end. I struggle to understand what kind of hold does a psychopathic leader have in this organization that being out of the country for as long, continue to enjoy this kind of reverence and loyalty. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Why has end-to-end not moved on beyond adoption?
Because what was that line in The Godfather? It's not personal.
It's not personal, it's strictly business.
Yeah, exactly. It's not personal, it's strictly business. And if you have a huge outfit now, existing in concentric circles, led by quite a hardcore set of gang leaders at the top, and they have been accumulating property and money, not shared equally, I hasten to point out, then it's difficult to crack that structure. It's not a political problem, actually. It's partially a problem of how you deal with incredibly well-organized crime. The fact that they are both criminals and politicians is the story of Pakistan.
Just to follow on, you said why, but I'll ask again, why is the British government and the American government so enamored of the MQM?
I think because they feel it's an instrument they could use in an emergency. Very straightforward. I mean, they have all sorts of people on their payrolls, and they don't use them permanently, but it's good to keep him there just in case they might need him. Who knows what might happen? And Karachi is an extremely important city for Pakistan. It's the largest port town. Weaponry comes in there. Weapons go from there to the frontier, etc., etc. It's a place they want to keep under some control. Yeah.
First of all, 1953 is the Munir inquiry.
Sorry.
The 1953 mentioned, the report that you mentioned is the Munir inquiry.
It's the Munir inquiry.
Not the Bukiani.
No, it was Bukiani was a junior judge, but he and the Munir were both.
It's the Munir inquiry.
The Munir, yeah.
And it is worth reading, you're quite right.
Yeah.
Secondly, in terms of the military itself, I mean, the military has become so powerful in the country. They're in economics, they're in industry, they're in agriculture, they own land, whatever possible. How would that stranglehold be taken away if Pakistan has to really flourish in terms of economy, in terms of doing something for the people of Pakistan?
The only answer to that, the only way that will be taken away is by a popular uprising. There is no other way to get rid of that, and no government is going to legislate. And that is another difference, by the way, between India and Pakistan. There are generals and our senior officers are very corrupt. Not just in the army, the Navy, Air Force. And Zardari, they encouraged it even more. Let us all do it together. And I mean, you ask sometimes Indian generals, I haven't met one, but they in interviews that have been published, they say they were amazed. So when we retire from the Indian Army, if we're lucky, we'll get a 3-bedroom flat in a government quarter of Delhi for our retirement. In Pakistan, these guys had huge tracts of land, farms, hunting grounds. It's a different world from ours, and we were all the same once. Yeah.
I want to know your opinion about the state of Pakistan, what it is nowadays, in terms of Saudi influence.
You speak up.
Saudi Arab influence, because we have touched quite a few states which has influenced the Pakistan.
Saudis played a big part in that. And most of the Wahhabi preachers who were sent to Pakistan, Indonesia, Africa, elsewhere, happened in the late 50s, when you had a concurrence of two things. Cold War intensifying and a huge current of Arab nationalism sweeping the Arab world. After Nasser's victory, the nationalization of the Suez Canal, the attempt by the Israelis, the British, the French to occupy Egypt, that particular war, and the consequences, nationalism, get out of our lands, we don't want you here. So they decided that one way of trying to control this was through religion. And they were totally pro-Islam then. This is why it's, you read some of the things they say now and compare to what they were saying in the 50s and 60s and 70s, even as late as the 80s, because that's when they needed to fight against the... So that was the time Saudis grew and grew. And with Pakistan, they also had other links that, one of the things about the Saudi royal family is that they are very aware of their precarious hold on power. They know that without the Americans they wouldn't be there. But they also know that if they ever built a real Saudi army, what might happen? They don't trust their own people. So the actual number of the Saudi armed forces and air force is tiny. They buy enormous amounts of weaponry and aeroplanes from the United States, which is a way of paying tribute. Tributary states do that. And a lot of these things rot in big warehouses in the desert and have to be chucked after 5 years because they will all be, they're not fit for anything. And so instead of creating their own armed forces, they have what, in a rude word, would be mercenaries, or a polite word would be contractors. And Pakistan supplied a lot of these. It was a Saudi state. I used to joke with some of my contemporaries in the 70s who were serving in Saudi Arabia. I said, I'm tired of organizing coups in Pakistan. Organize one in Saudi Arabia. Do something else. Because they said we could. They would say, seriously, we could. I said, can't tell me what. So that has been the link. And money. Money.
Such a political influence. I mean, every leader seems to go either to England or to Saudi Arabia after they are thrown out of the SOAS. And they come back to the deals within the Saudis and USA.
They go for two reasons. One is to get the blessing, and the other is how many people stay. Yeah.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier on. You talked about the fact of Jamaat Islami university culture, and I was reading recently that concern about immigration in London has become a euphemism for fear of Islamic raids. And I was wondering if during the partition and a little bit after the partition, there were movements by figures such as Sir Sayyidin for educational reform and to change the way the current Pakistani was viewed. And I was wondering if you thought there was hope for such a type of new age Sir Sayyid movement, and if that would help change the way Pakistan is viewed in global context.
Well, look, the Jamaat Islami was not very strong in Pakistan after the partition. In fact, their headquarters were in India. And they were opposed to the formation of Pakistan, as were the Deobandi groups. They were not in favor of it. And from the point of view of Islamic orthodoxy, they were not totally wrong. Said, we don't create tiny little states, we want the world. That is the, how can Pakistan be a Darul Islam? It's a joke when we're surrounded. It can't be. It's a bad idea. They used to call Jinnah, the Muslim League called him the Qaeda-e-Azam, and the Jamaat-e-Islami would shout Kafir-e-Azam. create a secular state in Pakistan, and he was very clear about that. Jinnah, his vision for Pakistan was a smaller version of India. That was his vision. It was utopian because, you know, if you say we can't live with Hindus and Sikhs in India, so we have to have a state where we're a majority, then obviously Hindus and Sikhs in the country were making us saying, oh, we don't want to live under you either. You know, you couldn't live together. So they left. But Jinnah had no idea. That shook him to the core, the fact that the massacres that took place, he was shaken, and by the refugees and their stories. That is not what he had envisaged, but that is the, unfortunately, the logic of partitions as we see in the Yugoslavia in the 90s. But to come back to your question, the Jamaat was a late arrival on the scene. And then they became what we call the contractors of official Islam in Pakistan, just determining who was right, who was wrong. But prior to that, no. And for a long time, this was held against them by mainstream political society in Pakistan. Who are you to speak? You were against the formation of this country. So they were not strong. They became very, and look, even now, if you look at the votes cast in Pakistani elections, however bad these elections are, all the religious groups, moderate like the Jamaat or extremists or whatever, they don't get more than 10% of the vote nationally. And that one should never forget. You know, it's not that type of country. It may become one, I hope not. But they became very fertile during the Zia years because they were used exactly like elements of the Brotherhood were used in Egypt under Sadat to get away from Nasser, for them to get away from Bhutto and go and sort out the culture, and go and sort out the universities, and go and sort out television, and the journalists, and the newspapers, and they infiltrated people everywhere. Jamaat-e-Islami was in charge of the Ministry of Information for most of the years. So it's a relatively recent. Prior to that, they used to be our problem. It's very funny when I run into them now, because I remind them that during the AU period, they were all pro-American. They won't hear a word against the United States. So they are quite open with me. So I said, what about them? उस वक्त क्या आपको हो गया? कहते उस वक्त तो सुर्खे हमारे आपकी जैसे सुर्खे हमारे दुश्मन. Communists like you were our enemy, so we had to back the United States. So I said it was very short-sighted. Hang on, who hasn't asked? Yes.
You mentioned Imran rising in the polls in Pakistan, and a lot of the youth have placed their hopes on him. He's obviously a great character, has done a lot for the country, but do you think he can change anything substantially? Because he's like
I'll mention it as a joke, but no, I mean, the fact is that people do take it very seriously. So, what can he change? I don't know. I mean, I think he needs a vice presidential person with him, like Alim Dar. Alim Dar was probably one of the few people, Imran isn't corrupt. Alim Dar is probably one of the most incorruptible Pakistanis in the public eye. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
No!
ICC umpire.
He's the umpire. In this strange game called cricket. Yeah. The people who haven't asked you that. Yeah.
I just wanted to know your thoughts on Shamila Boss's revisionist history of
Sorry.
I wanted to know your thoughts on Shamila Boss's revisionist history of 1971.
Look, it's a strange book. I don't know why exactly she wrote it, or who encouraged that book. I don't believe it. I have many friends in what was then East Pakistan. Just wiped out. and often on foot, met people, had names, photographs, and quite a lot of those people, later when I inquired about them, wiped out. Now, I don't care personally whether the figure is 2 million or 500,000 or 250,000 or 1.3 million. We will never know, because lots of bodies were burnt, especially of the Hindus who were killed. Lots of bodies were burnt. So we will never know the real figure. But this book, I mean, I did wonder, to be frank with you, whether it had been funded by the USI. Because they do fund movies and books sometimes. I mean, there was a famous movie in Pakistan which all our friends were going to, I've forgotten the name now, a few years ago. Nader, can you remember the name? Huh? A movie which was made by that guy, the director. So I wondered whether this was a similar operation. And it's foolish now. I mean, one good thing Musharraf did was when he went to Bangladesh, for the first time, a leader of Pakistan apologized, and an army leader at that, and said, bad things were done. I can't say more than that. Sorry, I was not involved, etc., etc. So, you know, that page has been turned now, but it was both unnecessary, foolish, criminal, what was done. And it also, I think, left a very bad mark on the People's Party, because Bhutto supported that repression. His followers felt obliged to support it. And that must have done something to them internally, you know, the way of thinking, how the hell can we support this massacre in East Pakistan, where our army is killing people who are not that different from us to their brothers. Yep.
In advance, I think I'm going to pessimistic point to
Yes, you have to speak up.
Do you think British Pakistanis, or even international Pakistanis who are settled here, should have responsibility to do something about Pakistan? And if so, whatever your answer is, why? And what can the youth do? Because nothing works in Pakistan. You need to belong to an elite family, or have the money, or just be a big honk man to scare people when you go back. So, what's the point? Why bother? Why? And what can we do?
Well, I mean, I'm never in favor of forcing people to do what they don't want to do. I mean, if you're a British Pakistani and are not the least bit interested in Pakistan, fine. Just make sure you support them when they play cricket. Don't fail the cricket test. But otherwise, I'm not a great one for forcing people to do anything. But there are many people, British Pakistanis here, who are interested in the country. And the ones who are the most active in their interest in the country also happen to be the most religious. The Hizb-ut-Tahrir, for instance.
Why is that so?
Why is that so? Because they possibly see or dream that they can get easy pickings. That they are wrong. Maybe the campaign for the new Khilafat will be launched from there. They think that. They're wrong, but they have an idea.
What can people do sitting here? What can the youth do?
If you want to do something, do you want to do something?
Perhaps.
Perhaps. I'm not sure. Well, look, it depends on what you want to do, what your talents are, what you mean, at the very least, when the disasters happen. I mean, lots of people from here went, for instance, during the floods, taking goods, taking money, taking various things to help the poor. I mean, that's not such a bad thing to do.
But that's not sustainable, is it? And eventually you will just become tired. Everyone will become tired.
Look, nothing to change that country can be done from here. You know, that it goes without saying. It doesn't mean you don't think about it, you don't want to help. But change would have to come from within Pakistan to be viable and organic. But many other things can be done to help people, especially in these days where new technology just transports a thing done here all over the world, you know, which is making sure that when these corrupt politicians come, you show your anger. You know, the fact that height of the flood, the President of Pakistan was here signing a deal for a multi-billion-dollar apartment on the edge of Hyde Park. I mean, British Pakistanis should have bloody stopped that. Okay, guys, let's read it. Yeah, you have the last question.
Do you think that the growing
You have to
do
speak.
you think there's a growing movement of Pakistanis moving towards Islamism or like fundamentalism? And do you think if this is so, is this a reaction maybe to what capitalist development or crises or instability as an alternative system that you think may work?
Well, it's not towards extremism. I don't think that is at all the case, that Pakistan is turning in that direction. There is an increase in Pakistan of religiosity, but that is also the case in the United States of America, as you know, and many other parts of the world. Wherever there are lots of people feeling no ties at all and feeling completely alienated from what goes on, move in spiritual directions. And this is a phenomenon at the present time. But I don't think that unless they're really pushed by some external event, that Pakistanis are going to move in the direction of recreating the Khilafat or some other nutty idea. I don't think they're going to do it. There's no evidence for that at all.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to thank Tariq for this revealing discussion. We have an announcement to make. His books are available outside for display and sale purposes for all those who are interested. And other than that, thank you so much for coming.